All right, let me just move this and then we'll get started. And all right, first of all, thank you all for coming. Um, uh, Usually I'm not the one who's being the key speaker, but today I guess I'm taking things over. We'll be talking about Lunalight today, which is my main deck, and I have a presentation set up for you all. We'll go over some combos, deck list, ratios, and sort of other things. Can y'all see the screen? I can close it real quick and try it again. Stop streaming. All right, if that's good, then yeah. Um, once I get into it, JiGun will have to be on it with questions. So just feel free to leave anything, and I'll try my best to get to it when it comes up. But all right, let's get this started. So oh, background on Lunalight. Lunalight's a fusion-based archetype. Showed up in the Arc 5 anime, piloted by Serena, which is the girl in the right photo. Um, it's a despite being a fusion deck, and we're gonna go through all the cards, which kind of like give you the background on how it was previously played and how it plays now. Despite being a fusion deck, its legacy support pretty much allowed it to be more focused on being an engine in rank 4 and link climb strategies, uh, such as Orchist, Dangers, Raid Raptors, Tearlaments. Uh, Previously, its like most notable achievements were from Raphael Nevin, who won Chicago 2019 with Danger Lunalight, which he played going blind second. And then its win later in the year at Fort Worth with Lunalight Orchist by Ramiro Garcia. The very talented Jesse Cotton also played the deck to a UDS invitational win, also using Lunalight Orchist. Um, and the cards essentially, those wins uh, kind of gave credence to what would be an eventual hit, which we'll talk about when it comes up. Um, I thought that it would be important to sort of highlight the cards themselves, but also given that this is a hero server, and I also have played hero before. I played hero previously to playing Lunalight. There's a lot of similarities that essentially uh, are shared between the two decks. Uh, the card's most previous best normal summon is Lunalight Collider. Essentially, it sends a monster, whether it be from the main deck or the extra deck, for cost. And it's very similar to Evil Elemental Hero Prisma, Evil Hero Dead End Prison. It just sends for cost. You never actually want to negate this effect because it's pretty useless. And in the terms of using it in a fusion deck, it also works similarly to Wonder Driver, where if it's used for a fusion summon, you can recover Poly from the graveyard. Um, the effect of Kaleido is a soft once per turn, so if you had multiple copies, you could just use those. And although it's not going to come up right now, or it's not as important, if this card is banished, Essentially, it works very similarly to Transcendent Dragon from Tenpai. It essentially shuts down all effects during the battle phase. Uh, Yellow Martin is another part of the rank 4 link climb strategy. She works similarly ish to Malicious and Denier in a way, which you'll see in a sec. But essentially, you can bounce a Lunalight card from your field back to your hand, and she'll summon herself. But she gets banished once she leaves the field, and she gives, if sent, can search up a spell or trap from the deck. This is where the sort of like malicious denier thing comes up. Uh, Lunalight Tiger is our one of our 2 pen cards. Essentially, she is a one of our 2 monster reborns in the deck. She is a soft once per turn, so if you have 2 of them and you scale both of them, you can use them both. But essentially, a common play is you normal summon Kaleido Chick, you send Martin, you scale Tiger, resummon Martin, make a link or a rank 4, and then you bounce Tiger back to your hand, you rescale Tiger, and then you summon back the chick and then combo off as needed. Her monster effect does sometimes come up. Essentially, if it's destroyed by battle or by card effect, you can summon a Lunalight monster in a graveyard. Usually this comes up when it's popped while it's scaled. Lunalight Perfume essentially is a archetypal monster reborn, but not only that, it can be used as a non-once per turn searcher. So you can search any monster in the main deck just using this card. So essentially, in tandem with Tiger, with Martin, with Chick, it was just like you could just link climb almost endlessly or rank 4 spam endlessly. And alongside Blackwing Zephyros the Elite, which is not going to be pictured here, but I'll show it later. Essentially, it's a monster that if it's in the graveyard, you can bounce a card back to your hand and then summon it. It's a rank 4, a level 4 as well. So essentially, it's just more fodder. It works very similarly in its function to Yellow Martin, resetting the Tiger to once again special summon. Um, and yeah. Going over the lesser used or lesser relevant Lunalight cards, starting off with Wolf. Wolf essentially is the Miracle Fusion for the deck. So, since Kaleido Chick can send cards for cost not only from the main deck but from the extra deck, you would essentially send your setup with your fusion monsters and then search this, scale it, and then fusion summon to banish the fusion monster and Chick, which will then get you the the Tenpai Transcendent effect to shut things down. Her monster effect, I think in my 5 to 6 years of playing this deck, I've probably only used it like a handful of times. But essentially, it's just piercing damage. It's Dread Decimator for any Lunalight card that's on the field. These are the previous boss monsters. Panther. The way that the Lunalight fusions work is that there was originally Cat Dancer, which was just a basic monster. Then on top of that, is like another level or another tier above that is Panther Dancer, which required Cat Dancer and a fusion monster and a Lunalight monster. And then there's Leo Dancer, which requires Panther Dancer and 2 Lunalight monsters. Realistically, there's just no way that you actually do the bridge to getting from Cat to Leo. Is just way too exhaustive. So essentially, Wolf helps you bypass that by essentially you sending the Panther Dancer to the graveyard or the Cat Dancer, and then using Wolf to fusion them by banishing the cards. But essentially, the boss monsters previously were just very much glorified beat sticks. They essentially helped you to OTK, but you never ended it on them going first. You would play supplementary engines like Raid Raptor, Tearlaments, Orchist, etc., etc. And then finally, Lunalight Fusion. It's essentially worse Fusion Destiny / Branded Fusion / Ostinato. You can essentially poly, and if your opponent has an extra deck monster on their side of the field, you can use one from your deck or your extra deck as fusion material. So its value primarily came from going second rather than going first, because otherwise it's just poly if you're going first, and it's not really useful because again the boss monsters were awful. All right, so here I'm going to go a little bit more in depth because everything going forward is going to be post support. Starting off with Lunalight Gold Leo. Lunalight Gold Leo, if this card is normal special summon, you can add one Lunalight monster from your deck to your hand and then discard a card. If a Lunalight monster is sent to your graveyard while this card is in the monster zone, even during the damage step, you can target one of them and add them to your hand. She functions similarly to Stratos and Vion, and you can even say now Furnace, Mass Hero Furnace. So essentially, one, you're searching a name, doesn't matter, there's no restrictions on the name that you're searching, and then you just foolish any sort of, send any card from your hand. So either you can proc something like a Martin or a Chick, or if you just have like a brick in your hand that you want to kind of like send, like, oh, you have like a Perfume or a Serenade Dance, which I'll show later, you are getting advantage off of it. It's not like a mulligan, but again, it works very similarly to Furnace. Lunalight Silver Hound. If this card is sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you can special summon a Lunalight monster from your deck. And if you do, you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck besides Lunalight monsters while you control that monster. And secondly, it is essentially it's a spell, trap, and negate for anything that's activated on the field. You essentially banish Silver Hound and a fusion monster and go from there. I would probably liken her to Vision Hero Increase because it's really not a card that you want to draw. But because Gold Leo can ascend her and technically foolish her, or not foolish her, but send it to the graveyard by card effect, it procs anyway. Typically, what you're going to be summoning off of Silverhound is Kaleido Chick, because it's going to really start getting your plays going. Since Kaleido Chick is a foolish in herself, it procs Gold Leo's effect to essentially pull anything that Kaleido Chick sent to the graveyard back into your hand. So that is one of, if not our primary way to play around Droll. We're just sending cards to our graveyard and then recurring them to our hand rather than searching them outright. Lunalight Masquerade is another busted card. Essentially, its first effect is just a foolish. It sends any Lunalight monster from your deck to your graveyard. Its second effect is just absolutely insane. If you fusion summon a Lunalight monster, doesn't matter what it is, you can add a polymerization from your graveyard or banishment to your hand, and then you discard a card. And if you do, you essentially can you can treat the poly that you recurred back to your hand as Miracle Fusion. Normally, Miracle Fusion requires you to just use all the monsters from the field. They banish all the monsters from the field or the graveyard to the banishment zone. But say I want to summon the Leo Dancer, and I have the Panther Dancer already in the graveyard, and I have the two bodies on field. It would only banish the Panther Dancer, the other two monsters would just be treated normally, so they would just go to the graveyard. And the other thing that really makes this a step above is that since it's treating your polymerization as a miracle fusion, but polymerization itself doesn't have any text that says you banish monsters for the fusion summon itself. This helps to play around Artifact Lancia because Wolf would not be able to do anything. It would not be able to be used for its fusion summon effect, but you can still set up your banish your effect to go around that. Actually, it wouldn't be no, it would not play around Lancia, but what is the card I'm looking for? Okay. It's okay. It's sort of funky, but okay. Totally fine. First of our new fusion monsters, Lunalight Perfume Dancer. Essentially, upon its fusion summon, it searches Lunalight Perfume from the deck to your hand. You can essentially, its second effect allows you to bounce any Lunalight card that you control, return it to the hand or the extra deck, and then you can special summon, if you have one, a Lunalight monster from your hand. And it also has an effect where if you banish it, the opponent's monsters lose attack equal to their own original defense. This is, again, another busted card for the archetype. Lunalight Perfume actually could not be searched by Lunalight Yellow Martin because, as you can see, Lunalight Perfume is not a Lunalight card because of the space in between it. So the only way that you can get to this is by a Triple Tactics Thrust or by hard drawing it. And also another card, which we'll talk about later, which is Foolish Burial Goods. Essentially, her being able to reset cards makes Blackwing Zephyros the elite unnecessary in the deck, because since she can just bounce scales on her own, you have an extra deck way of doing it, and you have a main deck way of doing it, which is Yellow Martin. So Zephyros, which was just essentially a searchable brick, if you used Blackwing, is it not Blackwing? Raid Raptor Forstrix, which is just a rank 4 that searches any winged beast. You can just neg it from your deck and then just have this be the secondary bounce. And here is the boss monster, the new boss monster for the archetype, and the reason that this deck can actually go first as a pure deck. Lunalight Lager Dancer requires Leo Dancer and 3 Lunalight monsters. It is a towers that is only affected by other Lunalight cards. It can make a secondary attack during each battle phase, and as a quick effect, it is a special summon Raigeki. I compared her similarly to Shining Neos Wingman, but Shining Neos Wingman is like non-targeting and can pop back row as well. But he's not a towers, and he's not as cool. The one thing to note is that if, say, you had one of your scales, whether it be Tiger or Wolf, face up on the extra deck, you can still technically send those as the cost for the Raigeki effect. So it helps to, again, recur material or help you to get back those scales back to your hand. Thanks to Masquerade and Lunalight Wolf, and technically Lunalight Fusion, you can make 2 Ligers, essentially. So you have 2 special summon Raigekis on the field at once. And most meta decks right now, with the exception of like 2, really can't out 1, let alone 2 towers. A lot of the sort of like comparisons that you can think of as in recent memory, Pearly with the Noir, which bounces stuff back to hand, but if essentially it will stop being a towers at some point. And then you also have Raid Raptor, Rising Rebellion Falcon, but that one was much more manageable because typically it was tied to the quick spell like rank up magic, and if you just Cosmic Cycloned it during the standby phase, uh, they just lost their towers essentially. Good deck, am I right? Um, since the release in late April, the deck has topped many events. Most importantly, like winning the Shanghai World Championship qualifier. Um, a lot of like YouTubers such as like Yassine, Ruggles, Jesse Cotton, probably like a few other names, um, are essentially poising it to be a strong contender once it releases. Uh, Duad is supposed to release before NAWCQ and EUWCQ. I think it's like a week out before then. And so a lot of people are going to essentially be taking this to pilot it. Um, the support really multiplies the strengths of the deck, which is it has no major locks, it never has. The ability to spam bodies, still solid ability to go second while shoring up its weaknesses, which is you could not go first with this deck whatsoever unless you supplemented it with some sort of engine, whether it be like Utopia, Lightsworn, etc., etc. Um, you had to it necessitated more bricks because outside of Chick, Tiger, Perfume, and Martin, the deck's main deck cards aren't that impressive. They're like solid for like 2016 to 2018-19 card quality, but like in modern Yu-Gi-Oh, it's not as much. And because we get to cut a few things, our low non-engine count gets a bit better. It's not still not amazing, but um, it's better than it used to be. That's for sure. Um, do you have? Yes, yes. It plays around Ghost Spell. Thank you, Lapcaria. Um, is there any questions before I show off a deck list or a few things at all? Okay. Nope. Cool. Perfect. Bro, what is the question? Requiem, I swear to God, if you talk about Math Mech, I'm going to report you. Karibo package? Bro, we're not playing Karibo. You know this. If you unbank Link Karibo, maybe, but let's go into share my screen for the deck list. We'll talk about I'm going to talk about the weaknesses right now, actually. Yes, you can activate it. You can activate Ghost Ogre on the Foolish effect to send the to the graveyard. Can you see my Edo Pro screen? All right. So this is what I've been working with. I'll show or I'll explain a uh, OCG slash Master Duel deck list later, but I really want to focus on this. Um, so I don't really like how AutoPro organizes this, but here we go. So in terms of our Lunalight ratios, I just went super basic. Gold Leo, 3 gold Leo. It's now the best normal summon in the deck. It's essentially what you're going to, as an opponent, to be Veiloring, Imperming, Ashing. Usually, I would say Imperm or Veiler are the better cards, just because its secondary effect is still very important to kind of like shut down. The second best normal in the deck now is Kaleido Chick. You can still essentially say Foolish, a gold Leo, and if you have perfume in hand, you can you can use the perfume to special summon it and then get your search off that way. Um, Historically, people have used Veilers in perms on this card, and even in paper, people used to essentially ash the card, but since it sends as cost, people will essentially get cheated out of wins because the Lunalight players would just be like, "Oh, okay, you wasted ash. Cool, I'll let you waste the ash and not tell you." I mean, it's a little slimy, but you shouldn't be ashing something that sends for cost. One yellow Martin. In old builds, you typically played two, just because again, she is like a big recursion point. But with how the deck runs now, we are no longer a Chick Send Martin scale tiger or perfume tiger. We don't really rely on that resource loop. It still comes up, but it's not as important. You get one copy of tiger, one copy of wolf. These cards don't really advance your gameplay anymore, so running one of each is ideal, and it's due to the fact that we can now search the reborn / searcher. You can just essentially just run one of them and you'll be fine. The one card that was not mentioned earlier is Lunalight Black Sheep. Lunalight Black Sheep is our deck's polymerization searcher. Essentially, it searches either polymerization or a fusion substitute. And you could also add any Lunalight monster in your graveyard back to your hand, except Black Sheep itself. And if it's used as fusion material, you can add up to either a Lunalight monster from your graveyard back to your hand, or if you have like your tiger or your wolf on the face-up like extra deck, you can essentially recur it back to your hand. I'll show replays of like my own gameplay where that sort of comes up. And then the one other sort of engine requirement is Tri-Brigade Fractal. Tri-Brigade Fractal sends a beast, warrior, a beast, or a winged beast level 3 or lower to the graveyard as a foolish, essentially. This is used as another means of sending Silverhound, which again, if it's sent to the graveyard, can special summon any Lunalight monster from the deck. You have the one polymerization. I do not think you need to ever run more than just one because with Masquerade and with Chick, we can essentially cycle up to 3 uses of polymerization. We will just never need to run more than one. Lunalight Fusion, I previously in test list did not run it, but this card going second is just kind of busted. And another card that I'll show that's in the side deck. 3 Masquerade. It's sort of like self-explanatory. It's a combo starter. It's an extender, etc., etc. 3 Lunalight Perfume. It does help in certain scenarios where you can either get like a gold Leo negated. There's ways to play around that. Serenade Dance, which was not mentioned earlier. Essentially, if it's in the graveyard, you can banish it and send one card from your hand to the graveyard. Special summon any Lunalight monster from your deck. It helps in ways where you can essentially like proc like a Martin or a Silverhound or even like a Kaleido Chick just to get, poly back to your hand. As for like the sort of like consistency cards, you have 3 Foolish Burial Goods. Foolish Burial Goods just sends any spell trap to the graveyard. It's once per turn in terms of activation. So you're typically sending, depending on what your hand is, Perfume or Serenade Dance. I would typically say you shouldn't run this card if you don't run Serenade Dance. I think that sending Perfume to search something is a bit of a weaker start. And it's just like an extra push. Foolish Burial, again, another means to either send like Martin or Silverhound itself. Fire Formation Tenki essentially searches any Beast Warrior level 4 or lower, and it gives a 100 attack boost. Kind of like self-explanatory. The non-engine, I've been playing around with, so I don't think anything's set in stone. But I just went like Droll, Ash Blossom, like very sort of like self-explanatory cards. The two points of contention, or let me not even say 2 points of contention. As you'll see soon in the extra deck, the way that our deck is structured now, we can very comfortably run Dominus Impulse. I do know, as a person who does not play paper, that this card is very expensive and it has not been reprinted. If you do not have this card, which, is totally fine, just replace it with like Fua or anything else. But this card is just, if you can run it, or I would just run it. It's just so good, especially into the format right now. And I'm sort of I just really love Forbidden Droplet. Partially biased because it is one of my favorite cards in the game. But it does serve a secondary purpose where you can send the Serenade Dance, you can send the Perfume. It can essentially act as a sort of way to fix your hand. Very commonly, again, going back to Hero, you send the Malicious, you send the Shadow Mist, they proc their effects, or you use them to extend. It serves the same purpose here. Going to the extra deck, I run 2 Liger Dancer, 2 Leo Dancer. If you realistically, you are going to need 2 Leo Dancer to summon both Liger Dancers. 2 Perfume. This deck doesn't have a major grind game, but it does help, and also it does help. Say you send the second Perfume, you can use its graveyard effect to push for game. I run 1 Cat Dancer, which I'll explain shortly, but it's very good into one specific deck that will be coming up in Duelist Advance as well. In terms of the Xyz package, I run 1 Brotherhood Fire Fist Tiger King. Fire Fist Tiger King has 2 effects. First effect, it sets any fire formation spell or trap directly from your deck. AK, in this case, Tenki. It's the only one you'll realistically ever run. And the second effect, which really helps in certain cases where they have like maybe indestructible monsters, or say, I don't know, like Dragoon, for example. Not that Dragoon is relevant, but you know what I'm saying. It essentially is a pseudo Dark Ruler no more. It shuts down it negates the effects of all cards on the field, including your own, of non-Beast Warrior monsters. So it's something that you have to play around, but essentially you really shouldn't be using its effect like first, or just like you have to just be mindful of it. Baguska is 1, a way to play around Fulos, but 2, and more importantly, it is one of our deck's end board pieces. due to the fact that Liger Dancer is the towers and it's unaffected by non-Lunalight monsters. It's a sort of like barrier of entry. And then Dugaris is important and has been important in the deck for so long. It's the rogue deck fixer, I guess is the best way to put it. It has 3 effects. Either 1, you skip your next draw phase, draw 2, discard 1, which again helps because again it works similarly to Goldlia. We can proc effects based on cards that we draw, or we help fix our hands. Second effect, you skip your next main phase 1, special summon a card from the graveyard in defense position. And the third effect, which is not really going to come up in this deck anymore, you skip the battle phase of your next turn and then double the attack of a monster that you control. Totally fine. And then we have Battling Boxer King Dempsey. This one is a little bit, I don't want to say hard to explain. So realistically, you're looking at the deck and this card doesn't have any actual targets to search or send from the graveyard, but it detaches a monster, including itself, for effect, and essentially your opponent can't target battling boxing monsters. It's a quick effect, essentially. Its main use is you normal summon Kaleido Chick, send Martin, revive Martin in some way, you exease them into King Dempsey, and you detach the Martin, which allows it, since it's being sent as not as cost but for effect, to then proc Martin's effect to search a Lunalight card, spell or trap, which in most cases is going to be the Masquerade, but you can search the Lunalight Fusion if it comes down to it. There are 2 other alternatives to it, which I will explain in the tech. SP Little Knight, another end board piece for the deck. So essentially, your standard end board is going to feature some variation of SP Little Knight, Baguska, and Liger Dancer, or 2 Liger Dancers and a Baguska or an SP. Essentially, the reason that our end board is so strong is that we have multiple checks before getting to, the out to Liger. So the SP banish, make the Baguska acting like pseudo skill drain, can be played around, obviously. And then also you're going to have the Hound in the graveyard to essentially, more times than not, banish the Perfume Dancer to negate a spell or trap. So if your opponent can't get rid of the SP, if they can get rid of the SP, then they have to address the Baguska. If they get rid of the Baguska, they have to address the Liger Dancer. And most decks just can't do that with Engine. And then your non-Engine and Silverhound is what you use sort of play around that, or to protect yourself. Cross Sheep is an extender. It helps us to get resources in the graveyard. As you can again already tell, Liger Dancer is a very exhaustive, resource intensive monster to summon. It's very worthy of summoning, so making sure that you get enough materials in the graveyard and then setting that up is important. And then you can just convert the Cross Sheep into your SP Little Knight. Amirage. It was like a very early innovation tech. Gold Leo, 600 attack. If they essentially negate it with a Veiler or an Imperm, and if you have Perfume in hand, you essentially link the Gold Leo off into Almirage. You resummon the Gold Leo using the Perfume. You then would search the Black Sheep. Black Sheep discards itself to search Poly. And because Gold Leo can add any monster that's sent to the graveyard, any Lunalight monster that's sent to the graveyard. It can add back the black sheep that discarded itself. Now you have two Lunalight monsters. Holly, you're just making Perfume Dancer. Just simple as that. So recurring your own materials is, I mean, it's just busted. So, and then obviously with the Amirage, you can convert it into the Gross Sheep or the SP Little Knight. And the final monster in my extra deck is Guardian Chimera. I think if there's a lot of like slots that you can use to fill this in. My personal reasoning for using Guardian Chimera is that it's a board breaker. It's a, you know, a resource like advantage grabber, and it's a boss monster in itself. And essentially with like quality effects like Martin, like Hound, like Kaleido Chick itself, or even Black Sheep, you can chain block it rather easily, and it also helps to convert like dead non-engine. Say you have like an extra copy of Ash or Droll and Lockbird or whatever you might be running. I think it's just very easy to summon, and if I get a pop in two draws or two draws and a pop, I think it's just absolutely fantastic. I'm gonna stop there. And do you have any questions before I go into the extra the side deck, or not the side deck, but it's like text? Do I think running pure Lunalight would be more ideal? Da, da, da. Yeah, you could. I would essentially. I'll go over some of the sort of other engines, but essentially pure, I would say, is the best way to run the deck at this point. Um, I don't think you at this point necessarily need to run other engines. Um, Cat dancer use. Okay. Um, pull that up before I go into the side deck. So, um, Cat dancer has two uses in a post duad world. Um, as some of you might be already familiar with, one of the decks that also gets support in Duelist Advance is Vanquish Soul. Vanquish Soul is slated to be the best deck post Duad, and especially post Justice Hunters once K9 comes out. Vanquish Soul has two really bad cards for us to deal with. As if you're going to essentially use Liger as your win con. The first is going to be Snow Devil. Oh, sorry. Snow Devil essentially gives their monsters protection from being destroyed by card effect, meaning realistically you're not going to be putting as much damage out because their monsters would have to be destroyed by battle. And if you're dealing with like a Rock of the Vanquisher, which makes you either attack into like the Borger or the Caesar Valius, which are really big, beefy cards that, you know, we just would have to address. And the second thing is if they for some reason don't set up Snow Devil, Vanquish will start their new field spell. Basically says if a monster is going to be destroyed by battle or card effect, they just reveal a monster in their hand, any Vanquish Soul, and it negates the destruction. And they don't even have to do it. They can do it like more than once, I'm pretty sure. But essentially, these two cards stop any sort of Liger win con. Even with the effect of banishing the chick, because this is a condition that she can activate rather than it being an effect, they can still use the effect to protect their monsters as needed. Meaning, we have to find a way to get the damage down, which is where Cat Dancer comes in. Cat Dancer, essentially, as an effect, you tribute a monster, a Lunalight monster, and it can essentially attack every monster on the field twice. And it also does like 100 per L life point burn damage, which is very menial. Um, it's a 24-point monster, maybe 25 based if you have tanking on the field. That doesn't sound that impressive until you then combine it with Perfume Dancer's effect to essentially lower the attack of all the Vanquish Old monsters. So unless they have them all in defense, then essentially you can you can essentially put damage on board with just the Cat Dancer. The second reason, and I guess we'll go into it now, that we run Cat Dancer over sort of other things is, I guess we'll work backwards, is this card. Heavy Polymerization essentially allows you to fusion summon any monster from the extra deck using three or more monsters from your hand or field as material. You can banish monsters from your extra deck as material up to the number of monsters your opponent controls, but you lose a life points equal to the total attack of the monsters banished when that monster is fusioned. So essentially, you are going to be banishing. You obviously have to banish a Leo Dancer to summon Liger. So you need something that is not as much. You need something with low enough attack points that you can survive the use of this card. So Cat Dancer is going to be the function for that. But again, since she is going to be an answer to the Vanquish Soul matchup, it's fine. I would say you typically don't want to use like your second Perfume just in case you have to go into the grind game. But the way that Heavy Polymerization and by extension Lunalight Fusion work, these cards are nuke buttons. It's essentially like, say I'm going second and I'm playing Tenpai and I wasted all of your interruptions and then my last card in hand is Sangin Kaiman. Congratulations, you lose the game. That's essentially what that's essentially what Heavy Polymerization and sort of by extension Lunalight Fusion are. They are the Sangin Kaimans. They are the blowout cards for our deck. Because again, if you wasted all your interruptions and I still get to Liger Dancer, I'm probably going to win the game because there's no answer for most decks to stopping Liger. It's just not possible. If you threaten attack damage on game, I will just use the Liger Dancer to pop that monster, whether it be the Axis Code, well, not the Shiny Neo Swingman, but you know, that sort of deal. Thrust by extension is used to search the, your Perfume, your Lunalight Fusion, your Heavy Polymerization. So essentially, if I wanted to side it, or if I even wanted to main deck it, I could drop the triple tactics thrust, or drop the droplets and just side in thrust Heavy Polymerization, and then just almost win game on spot. Going over the Lunalight specific tech cards, Lunalight Crimson Fox essentially has two functions. If it's sent to the graveyard by card effect, you can target a face-up monster on your opponent's field and change its attack to 0. Again, it functions, we're talking like an OTK beatdown deck. Helps to put your game on board. The second effect. The second effect, if your opponent targets a Lunalight monster with a card effect, essentially banish this card, negate the activation, and each player gets 1,000 life points. This was played around with due to the fact that you kind of really want to resolve Gold Leo in most cases. And if your opponent Veilers you or imperms you just would negate this. Essentially, you would send it via Kaleido Check just to protect it in cases where you can get them both on the field. Emerald Bird. Emerald Bird, normal or special summon. You can send a Lunalight monster or Lunalight card from the hand to the graveyard, and if you do, you draw one card. It sort of helped to like unbrick a Yellow Martin, send a Lunalight Serenade Dance so you can get things going. Again, since Lunalight Perfume is not a Lunalight card, you could not send this, but it had its uses. Its second effect is if it's sent to the graveyard by card effect, you can target a level 4 or lower Lunalight monster that's banished or in the graveyard, and then special summon it. Um, this its main purpose really comes down to either playing around Bestials or playing around like Nib, where essentially they nib you while Emerald Bird's on the field, and congratulations, we can still extend after that. Lunalight Saber Dancer is one of the other or Lunalight fusions. Essentially gains 200 attack for each Beast Warrior that's banished or in the graveyard. Opponent can't target with card effects, but that is not the case why you used it. It's its second effect. Essentially, on the turn after you send it to the graveyard, you can banish it and give any of your Lunalight monsters, any fusion monster actually, a 3,000 attack point boost. So give Liger a 3,000 point boost. Now you have to deal with 6,800 damage, to your face, which most people can't deal with. Panther Dancer, which you talked about earlier. Panther Dancer was what got you to your Leo Dancer, your original boss monster. The main reason that you would side this, or even possibly main it, is actually for the mirror match. So Liger Dancer is unaffected by card effects except Lunalight cards. So Leo Dancer then becomes its biggest problem. Leo Dancer essentially cannot be targeted with card effects, and it cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects, and it can make double attacks similarly to Liger Dancer. And once per turn, soft once per turn, at the end of the damage step, if it attacked a monster, it can destroy all special summon monsters your opponent controls. So Liger cannot threaten Leo, but Leo can threaten Liger. And that is usually going to be your way to win the mirror match. And since you have the same, cards like the heavy polymerization, the fusion, the Lunalight fusion, because it doesn't work with heavy, but with Lunalight fusion, with the wolf setup, you can get Leo Dancer out and beat over another monster. Or if you have something like the Dugares, you can boost it up, or like the Tenki. Like, there's various ways, but essentially you're gonna pop the Liger Dancer regardless, because it is a Lunalight monster, and Liger Dancer can't address the Leo Dancer. Chaos Angel is essentially very easy to make with Perfume Dancer plus any of the level 4s. I never really saw any use for it. I tested it like very, very early, but Liger just is a better alternative for it, because you're not really going to be summoning it we're not really running synchro monsters, so the light effect doesn't matter, and we don't have a lot of light monsters to use it anyway, and monsters you control can't be destroyed by battle. I think it's pretty negligible, so I really never cared for the card. Raiders Knight / Arc Rebellion Xyz essentially was the other win con for going second with the deck previous to support. Essentially, you bait all the interaction, and then you make a fatty Arc Rebellion, and then just push for game with one attack. It's pretty good, but the issue is that since the extra deck is pretty tight, due to the fact that you have to run so many fusions for Liger's effect, and then you have sort of like the consistency cards, it just won't really see use, which saddens me because I really love that card. Then comes Outer Entity Nyarla and Redoer. These two cards essentially function similarly to Balan Boxer King Dempsey. Redoer essentially sends for effect but banishes itself to do so. It helps to, again, proc Martin's effect to search. But since we're losing the body, we can't use it for link material, which you would kind of do. And the effect of like taking a card from your opponent's deck and get, praying that you get like a trap or a spell is just very negligible. And I think it's the worst of the three, even though it's, you know, pretty easy to make. And then Antonyarla, once again, it's essentially being used to proc graveyard effects. Nyarla gets the advantage that she can proc both effects of whatever monsters are under her. The issues with Nyarla are one, um, you need a monster in the graveyard to attach to Nyarla when you use its effect. And secondly, and most importantly, um, it does get shut down by Dominus Impulse. So if for some reason you had to Dominus Impulse early into the combo, it shuts Nyarla down. King Dempsey does not have that restriction. It's a quick effect, so if they try to chain like the Veiler or the Imperm, not that it's, again, it's really bait at that point. But yeah, it's just better than these two, so I don't really see any reason to run these two. OCG loves Nyarla, and I think they still use it to this day, but I think King Dempsey is just better. Even though I think in the TCG, it's like a $10 card. Evil Snorm Nightmare essentially is an alternative to Baguska, but in 99% of cases, I rather just go Baguska over the Nightmare. Since Nightmare is checked by any sort of fusion deck, so Hero, for example, it doesn't really do anything. Flame Banshee, essentially, even though I don't have the cards in the side deck, essentially is to help you set up like Protoss Lock or Colossus Lock, if you so wanted to do so. But obviously, it necessitates bricks, which we kind of don't want to do because we kind of got rid of the bricks for a reason. But it does win matchups like Malice, for example, or Mitsurugi if you go like the Colossus route. And then the final two cards, IP. IP essentially, if you want a layered interruption for the SP. But I, again, think that just going straight into SP is easier because, again, they have to address the SP. If they address the SP, how do they address the Baguska? If they address the Baguska, then have to address the Liger. Essentially, we already have layered interruption in a sense. So I don't really think that IP is necessary. But if I was to run any of these side deck cards, I probably would run her. I will mention this card, even though I despise this card. Gravity Controller essentially is our best means of removing Tiger King. So Tiger King, if you're going first, can get you the tanky setup, but to remove its materials, it needs to be able to negate a non-Beast Warrior monster, whether it be your opponent's or your own. Since you're going to have it on the field more likely than not by itself, it has no way to remove the materials that are underneath it. So what people were doing was summoning Tiger King to the extra monster zone, searching the tanky, linking it off into Gravity Controller. But in my personal opinion, I think that is absolute dog shit, and is just not worth it's just not worth the slot being used for it. I think you can essentially do like you can go straight into the King Dempsey. You can do Garas into King Dempsey or do Garas into Tiger King, just if you want to generate advantage that way. But I would never personally start Tiger King first. One, it plays terribly into Droll. It plays terribly into Nib. It plays terribly into Veiler / Imperm. There's just no reason to ever go Tiger King first in a world where you're going first. there's just so much better cards for that. So this card just absolutely sucks. I think that is it in terms of that. Bro, you're not even getting to Kaiju's or Lava Golem. Period, brother. Relax. Do you have any questions before I kind of like go over um some combos, which, putting card to paper? What are the best matchups or good when against meta decks? I think we have favorable matchups into every deck that isn't Malice or Mitsurugi. Uh, when I mentioned that there were decks that could out Liger Dancer on a more consistent basis, those were the two decks. Mitsu has two essentially searchable um, kaijus, which are Wosu and the spell card Sacred Boundary. Wosu is a kaiju itself. Sacred Boundary essentially says shuffle four Mitsurugi cards from your graveyard. Your opponent now has to tribute a card on their field. If they get rid of the SP, if they get rid of the Baguska, there's only one card left, and that's the Liger Dancer. So typically, the way that we address Mitsurugi is we make double Liger Dancer. Otherwise, you are going to lose one of your main interruptions and just lose the game. They typically don't run Sacred Boundary, but pure Mitsurugi runs Wosu. So you're getting outed at some, regardless. Unless they either bricked or you drolled them. Those are kind of like your only outs to that. As for Malice, Malice threatens you because it can set up both access code and cryptor. Access code, obviously, the big body usually ends up like 43, 5300, depending on your combo. And then Malice Cryptor is the archetypal Link 3. If it's banished, you can pay 900 life points, special summon the Cryptor, and then Cryptor gets its attack doubled, meaning it ends on 5,000, which again beats over it. What's usually your end board if, say, you have full combo uninterrupted? If you're blinding and like into a matchup, I would probably say double Liger SP or Liger SP Baguska. With all those are insulated by Hound Spell Trap Negate in the graveyard. And like I said, Requiem, I will jail you later, but no, we don't run Math Mech ever with this deck, and we never will. But I think other than that, we can go into some combos. All right. All right, last question, and then I'm going to show my combo video, or some combos. And then we'll go over some other things. Not bad. Are you weak to Nib? Nib is the most absolutely trash card into this deck. Unless you're absolutely greedy, Nib should never do anything to this deck. You're ending on Liger regardless because Liger's setup is usually in the graveyard, and you can essentially get to Liger in 4 or 5 summons. So no. Uh, the nib only threatens SP Baguska, and SP technically you can chain SP to nib, hit your own Liger Dancer. Liger Dancer is obviously not going to be affected by the nib. SP will still banish itself, even though Liger is not affected by SP's effect. So you're usually only losing Baguska, if anything. And even if even if you want to do that, you can do SP chain the SP to the nib, SP Baguska. Baguska is still going to be active on your opponent's turn. It just won't have the materials, so it'll die on your next turn. So you can still use it as a form of barrier. So Nib has done nothing to this deck. The deck's main weaknesses are Droll, which we still have lines for, Lancia, and Bestials. That is it. Otherwise, you can play through minor hand traps because our deck is built in a way where we want a lot of engine cards in hand. We're talking like 3 to 4. Is that it? Okay. If that's it, then let me just. Can you see my YouTube screen? Yes or no? Okay. Yes. Okay. Perfect. Okay. So this is a video that I did like 3 days ago. And if you have any questions about the combos themselves, just feel free to leave them. I'm gonna skip through like a few of them, but they're kind of important anyway. So this is like standard 1-card combo. So you do Gold Leo search Martin, send the Martin, summon search for the Masquerade, Masquerade Foolish, the Silver Hound. You summon the Chick. Essentially, you then spend the Black Sheep. Gold Leo recovers the Black Sheep to get you Poly. You get the Perfume Dancer. So you typically want to chain link 1, the Masquerade, chain link 2, the Perfume Dancer. Just so you can still play around not getting the perfume, but getting the poly is really important. I essentially discarded a card, being the perfume, to get the second effect of Masquerade. Search the Tiger. Essentially, here is where you kind of like set up. You get the Baguska. Martin bounces the Tiger. Tiger revives. You set up your graveyard. And then you poly. Again, since Masquerade resolved its second effect, the card does not need to be on the field to resolve the second effect, which is turning your poly into the Miracle Fusion. So essentially, this is full board. Your SP, the Baguska, the Liger, and then you have, even though you can't see it, I have the Perfume Dancer in the graveyard still, and I have the Silver Hound in the graveyard still. So I have a spell Trap Negate in my graveyard. The second combo, I don't really explain it too much because it's very similar. But the one thing to note is that instead of searching Martin, I actually search Silverhound in this replay, which it will be important later. But essentially, the flow of the combo remains the same. You search your Poly Searcher, Poly off. You chain link 1, the Perfume, chain link 2, the Chick to get the Poly back. Let's see, what do we do? Okay, So here's the one of the major things. Similar to bouncing the Masquerade, Perfume Dancer can just bounce the tiger back to my hand for me to reuse it at another point. Go into Cross Sheep, revive Cross Sheep into revive the perfume into a Cross Sheep zone to resummon. And then instead of going into a polyline, Sheep is not once per turn on its poly search, or it's adding a graveyard Lunalight back to your hand. So there are lines that allow you to, that will necessitate you to using both. Yeah, so essentially board
Yo,
stays the same.
bro, I think we are having same issue that Sansa had yesterday with the stream.
What up? Oh, okay, wait. Let me. I asked people. Some people said that they. Let me stop streaming. Let me stop. Let me stop streaming. Let's see. Okay.
Okay, that's good.
Okay. Do y'all
Okay,
need me to restart? Do y'all need me to restart the combo? Yes, no, maybe so. I'll link the video. It's totally fine. Okay. Yeah. Uh, Deviation one again. I instead of searching the Marant, I searched the Silverhound and I pitched the Silverhound to special summon the chick. Chick sends sheep. Old Leo adds sheep to your hand to allow you to search poly. You make Perfume Dancer. You chain link one Perfume Dancer, chain link to Collider Chick. So you're getting the perfume on your chain link one, and you're recurring the polymerization back to your hand on chain link two. You activate the perfume to Reborn. You then search. They're depending on your hand. Some of these combos are going to be different. You use the perfume dancer's effect to bounce the tiger back to your hand. Make cross sheep. Reborn the perfume under cross sheep arrow. Thank you. Search the second black sheep that I run in my deck. I specifically send Wolf before this setup, so I can add it back to my hand with sheep, and then Wolf Miracle Fusions into the Liger, and that's it. And then the third combo is Masquerade. You do need a discard for this combo for it to work. But essentially, once again, you add the sheep back to your hand after discarding it for its use. But since I used sheep for the fusion summon, I can add one of the Lunalight monsters back to my hand and use that monster for Masquerade's second effect cost. I bounce it back to my hand, send it off for the chick. And then this is still full combo. All right. Paying attention to like sort of like the small sequencing details or the small like details will essentially make it easier to understand the next combos. First, starting off with Ugara's combo. Essentially, this one you have to be a little. I'll pause it in a sec. This one you have to be a little bit specific for. In simulators and by actual rulings, you are allowed to use Dugaris' second effect even if there's no other monster, because Dugaris' first half is sending the materials to the graveyard, then activating its effect to revive. In paper, you should ask your judge, because sometimes they don't allow you to do this. They would not allow you to revive any monster from the graveyard for its effect. But if they do, you summon, you search. If you want to play around Droll, which I'll show in a sec, you do not search the Martin, you search the Silverhound. But in this combo, I'm just going to do the Martin. Martin send, special summon the Collider chick, and then it's just very similar combo from there. So I don't really think needs to be necessitated. And then this line goes through King Dempsey. So instead of sending Gold Leo, you send the Martin itself. Martin's effect searches since it's sent for effect. And then again, it's very similar in its combo structure. You return it back to your hand, summon Perfume Dancer. And yeah. All right. So this following combo is going to be how you play around Droll. You search the Silverhound. Silverhound, they'll droll you there. Instead of sending the sheep, you get the wolf. Wolf, similarly to tiger, is a soft once per turn. So if you have a way to rescale it, which will be the Martin in this case, you can scale it again for its fusion summon effect. So you have all your pieces there. So you can at least end on Liger SP. And then whatever non-engine that you might have. Other ways to play around Droll are essentially like dependent on when your opponent draws in your hand, obviously. Chick sending other materials to the graveyard and having like a sheep in hand. You can bounce the sheep to your hand using either the Perfume Dancer itself if you get there, or Martin. So you can recur like the wolf, for example. As long as you're setting up your graveyard, you can menially play around Droll, but this would be the easiest way to do so. And we even also have combos with Kaleido Chick plus Poly or plus Sheep. In the combos itself, I have Sheep in my starting hand, but it's preferable to have Poly. So you can really just imagine it being Poly itself. So you essentially would bounce the sheep back to your the chick back to your hand, search for the Poly, or have the Poly in hand. You lose out on the Martin, which is an important recursion point, but it still allows you to have a combo. And another important thing is that Perfume Dancer can bounce the chick to then special summon the chick again. So nothing not working. Oh my gosh. Why does this not work? My God. Okay. I'll send the video because I think my internet or my browser is fucked up. The second combo focuses on doing the same combo that I did, but in a slightly different way. Uh, yeah. So instead of you bounce, you add Gold Leo search for the tiger. and then just finding ways to recur. And this is as best as you're going to get in terms of an artifact Lancia combo. But you kind of specifically need the tiger in your hand already, or a means to get to the tiger in hand. Due to the fact that artifact Lancia stops us from banishing monsters, it kills the perfume and the serenade dance. So in this combo, we go about getting to the Liger by hard summoning it with 4 materials on field or in hand. You specifically want to make sure that with this combo or this sort of line that you're sending the wolf or any other card with like a negated with the negated chick and using the non-negated chick to take the name of the fusion monster, which then allows you to get to this first Liger, and then you use the second use the wolf to get to the second Liger by doing the miracle fusion. So yeah. Yes, Liger is best, Mom. That's right. I think. All right. Just bear with me 1 second. I'm not gonna go on for too much longer. All right. So, some things to note. He shows it here. SP Little Knight, if you use its first effect, which has the restriction of like you banish a monster, a card in your opponent's field, graveyard, etc. It doesn't allow you to attack your monsters to attack directly the turn that it is that's used. Due to the fact that Liger is unaffected by other cards that are not Lunalight cards, the SP Little Knight backdraw or the consequence doesn't matter because you can still attack directly using the Liger Dancer. So I would probably say that if you plan to play the deck, and you should know this ruling, definitely it'll probably be a contention with judges, but yeah, it's a tower, so this thing doesn't matter. Let's see. Don't think. Yeah. Okay. This is what I was mentioning earlier. Masquerade helps to play around Ghost Spell because since Masquerade gives your poly the properties to do so, rather than your poly having the text that says you can banish cards, Ghost Spell is not usable to negate the secondary effect of the poly once it's affected by the Masquerade. So this doesn't do anything. Ghost Spell does still hit the wolf, but the poly will be fine. Which one's this? Oh yeah, this goes over like hound effect. Yeah, if they steal whatever, if in the case of like Vanquish Soul, which will be again a common deck. If they steal the monster that you summon using Silverhound, which is what locks you into Lunalight monsters until you get rid of it, it essentially breaks you from the lock, since they have the ownership of the card. Also, what you can do is if you do get to Perfume Dancer and you still have that target on field, you can bounce the target back to your hand and resummon it, and it forgets that how it was summoned. So this goes over. I don't think anything else is that important. Oh yeah. Dominance Impulse will not affect any of your scales. The main deck Lunalights are all darks, but the scales are lights. Dominance Impulse only affects the monster effects of the cards, not the pendulum effects. So you can use them as you like, even if you do resolve Dominance Impulse. So don't be afraid about that. And yeah, I think that is it in terms of kind of like what I wanted to go through in terms of like replays and combos and stuff. Go over some last thoughts and then we can go in for questions. Pros and cons of Lunalight post support. Strong end board. It's like layers of interruption. The one lock that we do have, which comes from Silverhound, it's very negligible. It's very easy to play around. So if you want to play the deck, but you don't want to play it pure, you can still play stuff like Fiendsmith, Mitsurugi, Ryziel, whatever fits your bill. Perfume is now searchable, so you can use it in like very standardized combos. There's various lines to reach standard end boards. In terms of the Charmies, you can end on a Bagoose on a SP Liger within 4 summons. So you'll give them like 3, 4 draws. Perulia is absolutely worthless versus this deck. Meows is actually pretty decent, but the only other matchup that it's decent or good into is Malice, so most people won't be teching in Meows. It's also generally less expensive as a whole to sort of some of the other decks. It's like 85 for the core cards. The most expensive one is the Gold Leo, which is a secret rare. I think it's being charged for $25, $30 USD. Cons, the deck, although having lines, it is vulnerable to Droll, it's vulnerable to Lancia, and it's vulnerable to Bestials, which are starting to see higher play because of Mitsurugi. Malice, I think, still runs them. The deck is still very heavy with engine, so your non-engine needs to be compact. It needs to be very succinct, versus like other decks that can run like 15 minimum. We can run 15, but you're probably going to be on like a 43, 44 card build. A lot of the power of the deck is tied to like the new cards, Gold Leo, Silverhound, Perfume Dancer. So you kind of still want to be able to have lines for 2-3 card combos. Due to the fact that Liger and even Leo are very resource intensive, the deck doesn't have a lot of grind games. So if they somehow out your board, you probably won't come back. But that's why it's important to have like very good matchup knowledge and not let them get into their outs. And despite the deck being previously a OTK deck, it's still not technically the best going second. Like going second into like a Malice board, a Mitsurugi board, Heraldic Ryziel board. Like those boards are absolutely disgusting, and obviously like Ryziel Mitsurugi. Yeah, like relevant matchups post Duelist Advance. Malice is not very favorable. You typically want to go first. Um, Hope that either your non-engine can carry or that they brick. It's not like the worst, but it's not that fun. Mitsurugi Raziel and Mitsurugi, I think, is our hardest matchup by far because these decks can or do run the Kaiju, which outs Liger. And if they get rid of Liger, that's most of your interruption down the drain. Um, in terms of like Raziel, Heraldic Raziel, Animat Raziel, these aren't the worst. These two specifically, Anima and Heraldic, are disgusting if you let them full board you. But Droll typically helps with that. Vanquish Soul pre K9, in my opinion, is very easy to deal with. I think the deck isn't amazing. I think it's definitely skill matchup, but I think it should favor the Lunalight player if they're of equal skill. Sky Striker is like the other deck that's gonna be, I guess, pretty popular post Duelist Advance, but I think Sky Striker is just not that good. It's sleeper good, but I think you should still be able to deal with it most times. Orcus slash Punk, which came in the same pack as like the Gem Knight cards. I think it's like a similar case. I don't think they are hard enough where you'll need to tech for them. I think it's just, again, skill matchups, but I think it favors you, especially if you go first. I know Punk can technically threaten a Psychic and Punisher, but if you see them already set that up, you're just using Liger anyway. And also, I'd have to check, because I don't think Pep would be... I think Pep would be set to defense by Baguska, but I'd have to check. I haven't read that card in a while. And then post Justice Hunters, which is like K9, Yummy, Draco Tail. I've faced Draco Tail a bunch of times. I don't think this deck is that threatening. Yummy, on the other hand, I don't have too many games versus, but I think it's a much more complex matchup. I think that deck just has like everything. And then K9, which will more likely than not be run as a normal deck. It'll just be run as an engine and stuff like Cyber Dragon, Vanquish Soul, Crystron. Yeah, I mean, it's just like another layer of interruption. So, again, it just depends on the deck that you're facing. Yeah, the last one. Yeah, relevant resources, learn about Lunalight. You can always check my YouTube channel. I pretty much play it in all the formats, and cover like various versions of it. Vexen Yu-Gi-Oh! His YouTube channel is mainly like TCG format Lunalight, and he's also the owner of the Lunalight Discord server, which has like a lot of different discourse. If you're interested in stuff like Lunalight Fiendsmith, Lunalight Mitsurugi, Lunalight Orcust, and then although it's not as fleshed out, the Bastardal Meta Discord Lunalight channel, it's like one of the few good channels on that Discord. But the player base is like pretty small, but it's like a pretty dedicated one. Like final thoughts, I think the deck is like low skill floor, high skill ceiling. You're definitely going to be able to tell like who's an actual good Lunalight player versus like a scrub or like somebody new to the deck. Who would I recommend the deck to? People who like decks like Hero, like Chimera, like Fluffle. I would say it's closer to Hero and Chimera than it is to Fluffle. Fluffle's mainly just like the toy vendor, like Foolish Burial, like loops. But I think in terms of like how it combos, how the end board looks, it's closer to Hero and Chimera. It also appeals to people who like flexibility to customize the deck with like different techs and different engines, and also people who kind of don't want to spend money on like Mitsurugi, Malice, Ryziel, and but still want to be like competitive to some sense. I think with like the NACQ, WCQ, and the EU WCQ, I think it's going to be highly represented. Um, and I imagine there'll be at least like a few tops or like a good amount of people doing well with the deck. But we'll see. Uh, do we have any questions that I didn't cover? I think there's like one other thing I'll show, but if I can find it. But yeah, I'm open for like any sort of questions if y'all have any. Yes, no, okay. Oh, I think that is it. I think that's it then. Let me see if I could find this thing, but I'll probably just end up posting it in like the chat if I do end up finding it. The bro, you're not running kaijus, brother. I'm gonna tell you right now. Reason that nobody's gonna be running kaijus is because it doesn't do anything versus any other deck. If you actually want to, if you actually want to counter the deck, you either play Mitsurugi yourself. So if you actually want to do the kaiju thing, Droll, Lancia, Bestials. You can technically do Sales Ban, Black Goat Laughs effect, but those are gonna be less common. Nah, that's it. Yeah, if you can't put 3900 on board, through SP Baguska or through double Liger, it's not happening, dog. I'm gonna tell you that now. I think next time I do this is that I'm gonna have all the links set up. But me and Rossi were playing ARAM, and there was like a 40 freaking minute game of ARAM, bro, because these dudes would just not quit. But nah, other than that, that's all I have. If you have any questions that I did not answer here, you can always feel free to DM me or to hit me up on this server. I'm pretty easy to reach. Uh, I'll if okay, if you get hit by a white woman jump scare, I'm gonna tell you right now, you're really bad. You're so bad if you let them get anywhere close to doing Underworld, bro.